Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
How does quantum physics affect our ideas about the afterlife? What are demonic possession and exorcism really all about? What's the difference between reincarnation memories and ancestral memories?
Hello and welcome to the 979th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from WOON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live, on YouTube and via TuneIn.com. I'm Ben, and that was Paul, and today we bring you our first open line show of 2023, with a focus on questions we've received from listeners outside the United States. And if you have any questions or comments, you can call us at 401-766-1240, that's from anywhere, or you can email Paul at behindtheparanormal.com, or you can reach out to us via our Facebook page.
Okay, so let's dive right in there.
Sure thing.
Let's take one from Martino in Oldham, England.
Okie dokie.
Then if you'd be so kind.
I will do my best to be the kindest. So Martino writes to us. Hello, Paul. Just listened to your last show on Behind the Paranormal, and a portion of it reminded me of a phenomena in London, namely the Woolwich Tunnel, which runs under the River Thames. People walking through the tunnel experience strange time discrepancies when exiting at the far end, which jar with the with the perception of the persons at the opposite end. If you haven't already, it would be a great subject for a future show. Thanks for all you do, and a great 2023 to yourself and Ben.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tino, for writing in. I have been to the Woolwich Tunnel. That was a long time ago, in 1989. And the very first thing I noticed, the reason I was there is because I heard all these stories. Because it's very old. I believe it was built in 1902 or something like that. And I remember the first thing that struck me was when you walk in there, it's very, very long and round, and anyone with vertigo can get dizzy, and there might be optical illusions involved. However, it's very hard for time slips to be an illusion. I've heard stories that people will walk. I walked the whole thing from one end to the other, and it seemed normal to me. But people have said it's you can walk in one direction, and they walked back. It took them like half the time. There are stories of people standing at one end and kind of going in and kind of looking back and seeing a scene that is frozen in time. There are a number of those stories. And there's a running gag that when they built that tunnel, it was the only, because of the time slips, it was the only project ever undertaken by public project of that kind that was ahead of schedule and under budget in the history of the UK. So
the irony, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So, there's humor in everything. Ed Warren always told me, keep your sense of humor. He was right about that. So, yes, I think that would be well worth a show. I think we can try and find some witnesses and see what we can see.
London just seems like an interesting place in general. I watched a little video a while ago that was on this particular gin palace that used to be across from the jail.
You mean the Old Bailey?
No, it used to be the jail, but then it burned down, and then they built a bunch of stuff over it.
I think that's the Old Bailey.
It might be the Old Bailey.
Yeah, they still call it the Old Bailey.
Yeah, it might. Yeah, where they used to have the public hangings and stuff.
I've been there too.
So people would have they would have their breakfast, and then they'd watch people get hung.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, very, very grim.
Yeah,
it was a very grim time, I suppose. And it was really interesting because I thought about it, and I was like, I feel like I've heard so many stories, and I would probably venture a guess that there's a lot of factors that play into it. I believe I'd have to do some research, but I'd want to take a look at the geological makeup of most of.
Well, I was about to mention that.
Oh yeah.
Because this is a tunnel that goes under the Thames River.
Ooh.
And I guess they built it so that the workers in the stockyards wouldn't have to take a boat to get to work. And so not only is the water all around it on three sides, well, I guess it's cut through the river bed, and the riverbed of the Thames there is very weird. And we always talk about clay and sandy soils as being conducive to electromagnetic fields. That's especially true. It's really a goopy kind of substance, and it liquefies. So that may have something to do with perception and EM fields.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Or perhaps even some sort of. I know that this is a thing only from this one course I took in college that was a mixture of environmentalism and economics, but it was specifically about dams, like old dams,
like earthen dams.
No, like man-made dams, like from like the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
Because I believe Massachusetts alone has 1,200 unused dams that are still just there.
Really?
Yeah, because they're too costly to get rid of. Because there's so many like toxins in the sediment.
That's right.
Because of the old like fabric manufacturers.
The old Blackstone River down here, our own river. If the dams ever broke out, there are all kinds of toxins on the bottom, and they don't want to stir them up.
Right.
They're from the old mills.
Yeah, and it's too costly to get rid of them, so they just leave them.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine that with everything that's happened in London over the centuries.
Oh, good.
I can only imagine what's in the soil of that riverbed.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you can swim in it. I don't think you can even step in it. It's like pretty bad from what I understand.
Well, I think it's cleaner than it used to be.
Yeah, it might be cleaner now,
Yeah.
but the sediment settles, and if you stir it up, that's
Now,
when.
you said you didn't like London when we were there in 2012, and because we were going somewhere else. So anyway, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, there's some very good points.
I think because it just didn't feel like a different country. That's probably why I said that.
Well, you're talking about Heathrow. It could be anywhere.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, plus we were only in it for a few minutes, and it was just like, I don't know. There was just something about that. I was like,
Well, anyway.
Maybe if I spent time there.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there.
Well, we just come in from Iceland, which was very serene and quiet and lovely.
It was nice. I would love to go back there.
Yeah. Anyway, so much for the travelogue. Thank you, Tino, for writing in, and we will attempt to put together a show on that. It's a great idea. Okay, here is one from. Oh, where is it?
Oh, I've got the thing right here.
Oh no, well, I got
Unless you
some
want that.
emails.
Okay.
This one is from Per, I believe it's pronounced, in Sweden. And you can start with paragraph 2 there. If you would.
Yes. Paragraph 2. Okie dokie. I found your podcast program and website a week ago and started listening a bit. Thank you very much for a very interesting program. I have a question regarding the afterlife and the multiverse. I listened to an episode where you talk about life after death, and if I understood you correctly, one can't really die because you are already living somewhere else at the same time and always will. But how does it all actually work? If there are thousands or millions, etc., versions of yourself, do they have different souls? Or do all the versions of yourself share one and the same soul? How can they share the same soul at the same time? Or do they have different souls? If they have different souls, one version of one dies, doesn't that mean that the individual dies? Or even if a copy of that individual stuck with another soul lives on somewhere else, would that not be like if there are a lot of clones of yourself in a lot of different worlds, but if someone could make clones of me that will be surviving somewhere in another world and I die, that would mean that I would survive because there are cloned copies of me. Would I still die? I read this article called Why the You in the Afterlife Wouldn't Really Be You in Scientific America. What do you think about those arguments?
Okay, very good question and very good points, Per. Thank you. I think there are 2 points that we're always emphasizing, but can be very difficult to understand. One is time. There is no such thing. Well, there is in the sense of it's a function of our consciousness. But physics has pretty much proven over the last century and a half that there really is no objective time, and that what we consider past, present, and future are simultaneous. It's just that we experience them as past, present, and future. And how do we experience them? Point number 2, consciousness. It's all about consciousness. In my opinion, we are, yes, we're living all sorts of lives in many different parallel universes because point number 3, all possible outcomes do exist in concrete reality somewhere or somewhen in the multiverse, a term we did not invent. We didn't come up with any of these concepts. We may be the first or among the first to use them in paranormal research, but they're not, maybe the interpretation is kind of original, but not the concepts. I refer you to the brilliant work of Jacques Vallée, of Anthony Peake, and other people of that caliber, even Fred Alan Wolf, the distinguished physicist who has been on this show and talked about this. So I think when it comes to these lives we're living, you have to define soul. What do you mean by soul? We're very big, as our listeners know, on defining our terms. So if you're talking about the soul as the animus, the inner being, the life, the consciousness, sure, I think that is definitely shared among all our facets, a term we use to talk about the various lives we're living in parallel realities. They, in my opinion, make up our subconscious here. And in those parallel lives, this life here that we're living is part of the subconscious there. That's how we know so much. We always use the example of prodigies like Mozart. How does a 4-year-old kid who's had little or no musical education sit down and start composing brilliant piano concerti? Because he's in touch with where he already is, a brilliant composer in a parallel life. I think it is one consciousness, one soul, if you will. And another metaphor you could use is a tree, a deciduous tree with leaves. Sure, a leaf will fall off, but you're still the rest of the tree and all the other leaves. So there is, I think, one being, one consciousness, and subconscious all together. And I think that that would be my answer. I don't know, Ben, maybe I have a different opinion.
Sure. I think there's a wonderful resource that I always really liked who talked about this a lot, and that was John of Damascus. And
St. John of Damascus, yeah.
Our boy. He has a quote that I will read a little bit of. When someone, by offering a definition of what the soul is. The soul, therefore, is a living essence, uncomplicated, incorporeal, invisible, and, in its proper nature, to the eyes of the body, immortal, reasoning, and intelligent, formless, making use of an organic body and being the source of its powers of life, growth, sensation, and generation. The intellect being its purest part, though not in any way alien to it. As the eye is to the body, so is the intellect to the soul. It has power over itself, its volition and energy, and it is its volition and energy, and is immutable, i.e., able to be changed because it is created. All these features are natural to it, that are imparted by its creator, and its being and nature are thus because of the same grace which it has received. The fun thing about it, about the definition, is that it offers us 3 different things. And it offers that we're going to take a quick step back and talk about Aristotle for a little bit. So Aristotle had this definition of essence and energies. So we know a thing by its essence and energies. So we can know how something acts in the world through its energies, so we can know a person, right? So I know my dad through his energies and how he acts in the world. I know he...
Uh-oh.
Yes. Well, know is a certain term, because I only know to an extent. a part of yourself only through how you act in the world. So I know you through the things you say on the air, through the books you've written. I know you through how you've parented me over the years and been an example, but I don't know your essence. And so that's the other portion of one's being, which is the center of yourself that really only you know. So I heard this really interesting thing where someone said, if you really think about it, there's already multiple versions of yourself because everybody you encounter has a different vision of who you are because they only know you through the certain things that you've done, right? So it's like everybody who has listened to us over the years would only know us through this show. They would know our actions through and energies through how we've talked about certain topics, how we've dealt with certain things, how we've addressed certain questions and topics, i.e. this one. So your soul is the essence. But it also is a mysterious thing that has many different functions. It links us to our intellect through which we're able to know certain knowledges of spiritual things. It links us to the vital portions of ourself that can understand our needs, our hungers. It's sort of the center of your being, but it's broken out into many different things, and it can change. Which is something that I think is very important here because arguably, I think how we think of soul. I've asked this definition of people many times, and they're like, well, it's just kind of like your consciousness, your higher self, blah 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 blah. And it's like, no, I think it's more than that. It's something that it's indescribable, but we know it. And we know it through ourselves, our actions, how we sort of take in certain things, and it's similar to how we engage in certain topics. Us engaging in this topic right now, we're using our intellect, but we're also using our empathy. We're using our other senses that are sort of indescribable, indefinable, and a person can change. And I believe, at the heart of it, if a person is changing, their soul can change. And if you want to use a hyper sort of pseudo-scientific argument, you could say, well, it's energy, and energy can change because, that it's just constantly changing. Sure, yeah, you can call it that if you want. That's fine. But the idea is that it's this mysterious thing that we don't know its function, but we know it through how it acts. And I think that that's the really important thing when we're talking about, the end of things, the sort of the final things, if you will, especially when one, enters into death. And I think it really all comes down to how we view our cosmology, which is what I was trying to get at last week with Murray Silver, is our cosmology as a culture, not referring to the stars and the study of stars and their makeup and stuff. I'm referring to how we view the cosmos, the old definition of cosmos, the underlying order of everything, and how we view that, because it feels like we're also disjointed from the world around us, and it's so just we're all just so pushed apart and separated and isolated from everybody and everything. Of course, we have questions about the cosmos and how we understand not just ourselves but the world around us, and especially in death. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a study of the paranormal, in my opinion, because it was sort of a part of the culture before, and now here we are. Yeah. Because it wouldn't matter if it was a part of the culture. But the whole point of this of the question is, and I'm getting to that, is the soul can change, and it's a mystery as to how it works. And I think if I came up with a concise definition for, okay, well, this is what happens when you die, it would be false. It would lead you astray, because in the end, all I know is the experience that I've had and the things that I've learned, and that's about it. And it's from a certain point of view, and really at the end of the day, there's an objective reality that we know is happening around us, but we're all approaching it with our own experiences and baggage, looking at it and saying this is what it is. But really, I think the mystery of it is in the experience of it, because the soul in and of itself is just something you can't really define, but we know that it informs every aspect of our being. And if the soul continues on, not even as an individual. It's sort of a portion of our body is what it is. And it allows us to interact with knowledge. It allows us to interact with spiritual things. It allows us to sort of dictate ourselves and, choose whether to do, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. It's sort of this thing that should point us in the right direction if we allow it to. And sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. It's a very complicated thing. And I think how we as modern people view ourselves is just very disjointed. That, okay, well, there's body and there's spirit, and my soul is the immortal thing that's me, that's guiding a flesh machine. And that's not really it. It informs every portion of your being. And your physical body and, whatever is a part of that. And so in this multiverse thing, right? Arguably, just because it's all separate doesn't mean it's not you. It's
right.
Like just because I'm your son, Dad, doesn't mean I'm not an extension of you. And it's to some extent we're all an extension of each other. I think the problem is breaking out of.
That's my point.
Right. So
Yeah.
the problem is, you can't think of yourself as an individual okay, well, I'm me now, I'm going to be me forever in these many different worlds. That's not really it. It's that we're all extensions of everything else.
Well, I agree with that. One further point, of course, these are difficult concepts to grasp in a society that is very narcissistic. And the island theory is something that I think we're always talking about has to be rejected, because the island theory says that everything we are, everything we were, everything we will be is within us, implying that it's within our bodies, and then we're ultimately separated from everyone else. Nothing could be further from the truth. And so I think if you become more multiverse aware, as we say, the island theory makes less and less sense. And one point about Christianity in particular, it's not about how to die. Christianity is about how to live. Judaism is about how to live. I think every faith path should be about how to live, not how to die. Because the dying takes care of itself. How you live determines the bed you make in the multiverse for all your facets. That's how I would put it. So, okay, we're going to move on to another question. Can we take our break now?
If you'd like.
Okay. And then we'll have a nice, clear transition into another question. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM, 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. Open line show today. We'll be back with more questions, so stick with us.
Hi, I'm Greg Bell, the host of When Radio Was.
I'm Mortimer. Bill. Is that you under that blindfold?
Bill, with this thing on, I can't see who I am.
No, I imagine not. Can't you see anything at all under that blindfold?
On a clear day, I can see the blindfold.
You can?
Yeah.
When Radio Was, shows from the past for today's imaginations.
When Radio Was airs Monday through Friday, right here on ON 1240 Radio at 11 a.m. and 11 p.m.
You can depend on us for public service, ON Radio.
Okay, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON Radio, AM and FM. And let's get back to our questions. We're concentrating today on questions from overseas listeners in many different countries. So one fellow who appears on just about every show is Peter Shelley, but he is most definitely out of the country in Bogota, Colombia. So let's take Peter's questions for the week. Peter is an occasional guest co-host of the show, too.
Sure. Okie dokie. And Peter writes to us, Hi, Paul and Ben. What are your paranormal-related goals for 2023, and how do you plan to make them happen?
Well, that's an interesting question. Paranormal-related goals. Well, we want to finish the book we've been talking about, which is Behind the Paranormal 3, Uneasy Skies, about the UFO phenomenon. That'll be based on the formats of our other Behind the Paranormal books in that series. They will be looking at the interviews we've had with some of the greatest names in that field over the years, and plus our own experiences. So we're working on that. There is an enormous media project we cannot discuss, so there's that. And we're still doing, the flap area cases. We hope to get back to Pennsylvania in the spring, and a couple of other areas too. I'm trying to get that done. I'm getting up there in years, so I want to get as much in this year as possible. And our goals are just to learn more, do it better, hone what's good, and eliminate what's bad in our theories and methods. And that's, I don't know, how would you answer the question, Ben?
I think it's there's a really important lesson that I've been trying to live out in my life that I think is very important, which is transforming one's self for the better. Improving one's habits, health overall, and doing my best to be a better person. And we all struggle with a lot of things, and I am 100% not perfect, so I'm trying my best to be better. And I guess that sort of relates to paranormal stuff, because I am I get distracted very easily. I've been trying to write an essay for our book for the last couple of years, and I got very far in it, and then I put it aside because I was like, I need to go back to this when I have a clearer head and I have less going on, because oh boy, does life like to throw you curveballs. A wise person once told me that as you age, your problems don't go away; they just change. And so I'm doing my best to try and finish up this essay that I think is very important, because Murray brought up this thing last week, and I talked a little bit with Peter Shelley about it a little later. Speaking of Peter, where Murray was kind of giving like the history of the paranormal in the United States over the past few years, and I wish I didn't even think to bring it up, but Peter brought it up. Was like, oh, I really want to know what he thinks of what's going on now, and I was like, that's a really interesting point, and I thought about that for a bit, and I was like, oh, I wonder what the next step is, and I think there's some big stuff kind of happening in the world that is that's really going to define the next sort of generation of things to come, and it's not going to be great, I think. But at the end of the day, it's just a story that just repeats itself over and over again. And so really all you can do is just kind of do the best you can every day, and try and be a good person and just kind of do what you can. So I guess really the goal is as much as it doesn't sound paranormal, it is, because the world is paranormal right now, and ironically we're the ones that are that are doing the thing that's not crazy. Because it's kind of like the world's been flipped on its head, and we're kind of in this paradoxical time where everybody's kind of crazy and delving into their own little echo chambers, and it's kind of like it's very hard to keep yourself balanced. So I think the goal is to be as balanced as possible in the coming year.
Well said. The only other thing, too, is we're working on a chapter for Tim Beckley's new book on mimics. And there are all kinds of paranormal mimics out there. We've dealt with them many, many times over the years. And Tim is carrying on the publishing tradition of the great Tim Beckley, a dear friend of this show. So we're pretty busy. So
there is a second question.
Oh, there is. Okay,
there is.
From Peter, yes.
Yes, and Peter, his second question is, what inspiring advice, I hope it's inspiring, can you give to paranormal researchers and investigators for 2023?
Maybe we just gave him some. I will shock the world again by saying, don't do it. Don't treat it as a hobby. I know that we are often chided by paranormal groups who say that we are denigrating what they do, but they're using our theories and methods and getting some interesting and tremendous results. So we don't want to be unfair, but I think if you're not in the field, as Murray said last week, I mean, you have no idea what you're dealing with. What are you going to do if you bring something home? What are you going to do for your family? What are you going to do if you make things worse? The best advice is, read some good books, listen to this and other shows that might be valuable to you, but avoid the hobbyist ghost hunting.
Yeah, agree.
I wish I could be gentler with that, but I can't.
Well, I think it's important too. Oh, jeez. Sorry, video for all those watching our stream. I'm sorry, I sent you all over the place. I'm used to there being a guest. I don't know why I'm like a little off kilter today. I think it's.
Well, you're used to handling everything.
That's true. So
I just don't do the Blair Witch Project cinematography thing.
Yeah, I run over to the camera and start shaking it. No, I think it's really. I think one of the really big things is understanding yourself is very important. I was talking to someone recently, and they were saying that they were having activity in their house and stuff, and I was like, "Well, how are you doing?"
Right.
And they were like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Is everything okay? Like, do you?" And she was like, "Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Where there's some trouble going on, blah 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 blah." And I was like, "Well, I'm not a counselor, but maybe you should go see one." And it's like a lot of
that's everything.
A lot of this stuff is I pretty much said it's a symptom, not the cause.
Exactly.
And so it's like we should really look at ourselves first before saying the devil made me do it, because really at the end of the day we're the ones that are kind of bringing our stuff into the experience. Not to say that there's not negative entities out there. There definitely are, but we don't help it. And the events around us don't help it. It's not all separate stuff. It's all going on at the same time. So I think the two things, knowing yourself is very important, and the second thing is understanding that these things aren't separate little cubbies that are in their own neat little boxes. It's very messy, like stuff happening all over the place, and it's all happening at once, and it's all layered on top of each other. And trying to separate it into neat little boxes. Oh, it's just dead people over here, and then we're over here, and we see them over there, and that's it. It's like, no, there's all sorts of things happening here. Your fight with somebody else could be exacerbating the situation, or, you putting in, new plumbing or electrical, then, there's electrical leaks or something like that going on, and it's like, it's exacerbating a problem that might have been there before. There's so many things that are going on and so many factors. Doesn't mean the phenomena is not happening, but, it's a symptom of the environment. It's a portion of the environment that we are in. Well
said. Okay, let's move to a question from Mark from Devon, England.
Ah, yes. The old...
I left in his kind words. I thought they were so nice.
Yeah, let's see. So hi, Paul and Ben. Just discovered your show through a recent contribution you made to an Anthony Peake podcast. Thank you so much, and for the learned and open-minded approach you and your guests provide in areas so prone to sensationalism. We try our best. I enjoy your natural sage wisdom and Ben's inquiring analysis, which complement each other very well, as I am from Devon. And so excuse me. Could you tell me if the Wistmans and Exmoor investigations were the subject of one of these past shows, and if so, which one?
Okay, we have mentioned that on many occasions. Now, I'll give you the background. 1989, Ben wasn't even born yet. I was in Devon, and we've been to Devon, of course, too, because we have family connections there. And I was supposed to be investigating the beast of Exmoor. Okay, Exmoor is a national park. It's a wilderness area with the moors. If anybody's read British literature, the moors figure into the rather austere and I think glorious landscape of the southwest of England, really all over England. And so Exmoor is one of those wilderness areas. And there was and I took a day, and I went down to South Devon. Exmoor is in North Devon. to the Dartmoor National Park. It's the South Devon moor area that is. It's mentioned if you're a fan of Sherlock Holmes. It's mentioned in the particularly The Hound of the Baskervilles. Very lovely, austere, right to my taste. It was a march and kind of dreary, but I loved it. So that's the area that Wistman's Wood is located. And Wistman's Wood is considered one of the oldest forests in England. And it's not very big, but it has these very odd oak trees that are no more than 12 or 15 feet tall. And that's as tall as they get. It's very rocky soil. There is a very interesting quartz vein that goes right down the middle of the place. And you're not supposed to go in, but I did. You know, I couldn't have, nobody else was around. And I had a rather dramatic paranormal experience there. I was exploring, and I looked up, and maybe 30 feet away, toward the edge of the wood, was half a figure dressed in furs. I couldn't see the legs, just the top half of the figure. And I thought, gee, is this an ancestor of mine? Is this one of the Druids who supposedly took refuge in this forest? Because the Romans didn't like the Druids. And so in the Roman times, the Druids were sort of persecuted, and they disappeared into woods, and this was one of them where that occurred, and supposedly it was one of the last holdouts of the Druids in England. So a very, very dramatic history to Wistman's Wood. And the word Wistman's comes from the, I believe, an Anglo-Saxon word from either Old or Middle English, meaning wizard. So it's kind of the wizard's wood. Now, I wouldn't really consider that a case so much as an experience, okay? And it was in the context of my trip looking for the Beast of Exmoor. And just what the Beast of Exmoor is a large puma-like Black Panther sort of big cat that today is almost ubiquitous. It's somebody ran over one in Scotland, so they definitely are in the UK. But at the time, in the late 80s, it was still controversial. The Royal Marines had been out looking for it, but they saw figures, but they couldn't get a clear shot. So that's what the context of that. What's the second case he mentions?
That would be, so we had the Beast of Exmoor, and we have the Wistman's Wood.
Well, just start with what happened. What is something after that too?
Exmoor.
Oh, Exmoor. Okay. Or Exmoor would have been the Beast.
Right.
Okay. One of the first memory I have of that is rather dramatic. Something out of a Sherlock Holmes or Mary Shelley novel. Was on my first day there, I was met at Heathrow by 3 old shepherds. And I was the most exciting thing that had happened to them since World War I think. So off we go to Devon. It was a long drive, and there had been a sheep kill. And one of the issues here was that this big cat was killing a lot of sheep, and the farmers are losing money, and the insurance companies wouldn't cover it. You know, I was killed by a cougar. You know, like pay me. So that didn't go over very well. So they wanted somebody in there to kind of explain and see what's going on. And I never actually saw the big cat, but my first day there were police officers and farmers with shotguns. We were all running up through this. All I could think of was that last scene of the Lon Chaney Frankenstein film where they attacked the castle. They got torches and all. You know, all we needed were the torches, but it was. But I saw footprints that were absolutely huge, and they were cat footprints.
It was just a misunderstood monster.
Well, I mean, I talked to I interviewed a lot of farmers. I talked to one farmer who had seen two at the same time.
Jeez.
And since then, there have been photographs. And I was working with a man called Nigel Brierley from Bishop's Nympton up near Moulton, South Moulton in Devon. And it's ironic because the family reunion we missed in October. Went to South Bolton. I said, "Oh my gosh, I know people there." So anyway, that's what that was about. But we have no particular shows on those subjects, or
I think we might have done one a while ago.
Yeah, I would refer you to, Mark, to a film called Lions of the East. I believe it's on YouTube. It's one of our good friend Alexander Petikoff's films.
It's really good.
And I'm in there talking about that case and the Mansfield Mystery Cat from Massachusetts, which came kind of shortly after that, or a few years after that. So, but maybe we should, I keep looking through the shows because we have been mentioning these things kind of all along.
I don't know why, but I feel like, well, maybe we never did a complete show on it, but we may have answered like listener questions on it.
I think we have discussed it a number of times.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever done like a full show on it. We could always do that because there's probably fun little details that we could add.
But we're coming up on our 1,000th show. You'll have to excuse us, but we don't remember the subject or whatever we want. So.
No, our encyclopedic knowledge only takes us so far.
Yes, exactly. We are limited. So, what do we have? One from Facebook there?
Sure. Let's see. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Let's take Bernie from Banfield in Argentina.
Banfield, Argentina.
Yeah.
Didn't sound very Argentine. I looked it up, and it's a suburb of Buenos Aires. So.
Is it actually?
It is, yeah.
Fascinating. So Bernie writes, your ideas on parasites are very interesting, and I'm looking forward to more shows on possession and exorcism. Are your ideas really that different from the traditional ones, or do you just use different terms?
I think that's a very good question. I refer you to our show 2 weeks from today with Dr. Richard Gallagher, who is a psychiatrist from New York, who works with Roman Catholic exorcists, and he has a lot more experience at that than I have, I think.
Oh, that's
certainly.
Yeah, that's
25
really
years. So you might want to listen to that show. But the point that we make, we use different terms, but it's a good question. How different are our ideas from the traditional ideas? And the traditional ideas, I would say, are that when it comes to any kind of possession, it's a demon, a servant of Satan, who has that theological background and is trying to destroy a child of God. Okay? Our ideas are, I think, more in line with what I've seen, and that's that these are parasitical entities who come and feed upon us, whatever energies we're producing, particularly in a negative situation, as we discussed with the previous question, and that they would feed upon that. And the whole possession phenomenon, when I was working with a priest myself in the 70s, did not strike me as all that theological. I have seen them in other contexts use our own theologies against us, mimic, as will be this part of the subject of this chapter we're writing for Tim Schwartz, that they will pretend to be one of your loved ones, pretend to be something else in order to eat, just as other mimics in nature do. So I think my experience of exorcism and possession is way beyond the limited theology that we place on it. These are alien creatures. People are always asking me, is there a personal devil? Well, I mean, I'm far more interested in a personal God, which I believe in wholeheartedly. But you want to see the devil, I think sometimes you just have to look in the mirror or read the news. I don't care about any kind of thing like I care about God. I care about grace, positive nature. I care about uplifting things, and I care in the sense of helping other people with it. But I know that our approach works by displacing the negative energy with positive energy, with prayer, love, even humor in a positive sense, that's really worked. And I don't know, Ben, what say you?
Well, I guess it kind of depends on what your definition of traditional is.
Right.
There's sort of the Western idea that we've kind of discussed a little bit, which is it's demons that are very, very organized. They're an organized force to be reckoned with.
Well, they are.
And they're essentially...
But I would call them demons.
It's funny. I heard this really kind of funny thing. I don't remember if it was C.S. Lewis who said it, but somebody said that, the... demons or sort of demonic forces always take on the thing that people kind of fear the most, and for C.S. Lewis it was bureaucrats. So if you ever read the Screw Tape letters, it's like they're very organized and whatever, and evil can be very organized. I mean,
yes.
It can, and that's, the World War II is a great example of that.
Precisely.
But at the same time, it's always, it's chaotic at the same time because it destroys order, right? It's the opposite of order, which is good and unites us all, and, it's, things can be created and, but it's, really only evil has the power to destroy, and that's about it. And it can't really create anything, and any time that's ever happened, it just always goes bad. But if you look at the ancient version of what possession is, it refers to this thing that kind of got sort of turned into the 7 deadly sins. But it was originally referred to as the passions. And the idea of that was, because we kind of talked about this a little bit before the show, ironically.
Yeah.
And the idea was that, every one of us has the ability to choose, between following the passions, whether, it be gluttony, lust, all that stuff, or, doing, or not doing it at all, but we all make choices, and that's kind of the whole point. And if you keep choosing it, it seems to be freeing, but really what it does is it enslaves you to something else. And so there's a reason why liquor is referred to as spirits, because it can take over you and possess you in a way where you need it. It's a physical need.
Yeah,
and
it's drugs.
Right. That's what the traditional idea of possession is, or
certainly evil.
Right. And so, or like if someone who's married constantly cheats on their spouse, and it just becomes it starts off as a habit, and then it becomes a need. And it just keeps going, and it's one of those things, and it's like it's possible to break out of it and change it, but it enslaves you, it takes it, and we were discussing this before the show, and it's like, well, these are all spiritual things, they can't affect you. I mean, they certainly can, because there's a spiritual aspect to everything.
That's right.
And it's like if you've known anybody that's been addicted to like hard drugs, they look really different, their health is terrible, but when they get clean, they change. Their physical body changes, their mentality changes, everything changes, and they become more human. And so there's that sort of got lost, and it kind of became, well, it's not really my responsibility. The devil made me do it, and that's really not the traditional definition. That kind of was because of a fun little book called Paradise Lost that kind of really ruined ontology for everybody. And really kind of ruined how people kind of saw all these beings and such. But again, it depends on your definition of traditional and where you're getting these traditional quote unquote ideas from. So with that in mind, it's ever so slightly different, because the main thing in there is you have a choice, and it's not like you're completely powerless. There's a choice in there. And just because the terms are different, there's a choice in there, and really we choose to kind of go one way or the other, and it may be a change of definition of this traditional idea, by adding in this aspect of parasites and such, but really it's just kind of what we've experienced over time. I personally don't really see a ton of a difference. It happens differently for everybody, and how we experience it is different for everybody, because it's informed by your background. So how I've perceived it is through the things that I've learned and experienced. So I don't really think there's much of a difference, because the human story stays the same no matter what. We just change the words around.
Yeah. We're just trying to expand the understanding. But I do direct you to January 29th, our show number 981, Exorcism and the Psychiatrist with Dr. Richard Gallagher. So we have time for one more brief one, Ben?
We do. Well, maybe let's not go over the concept of time.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, okay. This is actually kind of interesting. So it's a couple different questions, but we can take one of them from Peter in Durban, South Africa. And Peter writes to us, I read your book, Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong, 3 times. Well, thank you. 3 times. Great book with so many new ideas. My first question, I live south of the equator, so would paranormal characteristics of winter holidays you have described be reversed as our seasons are?
That's a very interesting question. We talk in the book, we have a chapter about the winter holidays, and that's Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong. That was released in 2016 by Schiffer Books, and we have a joint byline on that. And the idea was that the beginning of winter was essentially Halloween, when death would be dominant in many ancient cultures, and the energies involved would be very interesting. Christmas, of course, being around the time of the solstice when the year turns and the sun kind of comes back, and they would have bonfires. But south of the equator, the seasons are reversed. Winter, the time of death, would be in the middle of the summer for us. June, July, and August. So I think, I think the culture, the consciousness, the cultural awareness of the same principles might very well be reversed, because it's all as Ben has suggested, all in the human experience.
Yeah, that is a really interesting question. I think that's probably it. It's informed by sort of the zeitgeist, if you will. Well, that's the spirit of the times. It's not really accurate. I guess it'd be the spirit of the culture around you. I think that's really important, and I wish I could give a better answer than that.
Yeah.
I'd want to look into it more, honestly, the different cultural customs and such.
Excellent, yeah. There's another show.
Yeah.
A shaman in Quebec, a Cree shaman, once told me that our faith in God arises from the earth on which we live, because that's where our experience comes from, with a climate or how things grow, our work with the earth to make it fruitful, how we live in harmony with nature and God. And so that would be, if that's true, and I definitely believe it is, then those in the southern hemisphere would have the same experiences with the earth, but at different times of the year. That's pretty interesting. All
yeah,
right.
definitely worth a show, for sure.
Okay. So let's go to our announcements. Thank you so much. I think our next open line show, we're going to take some of these questions we haven't gotten to from our overseas listeners, and really, really good stuff. So, Ben, take it away.
Sure thing, father of mine. So you can look for us at the New England Parafest in Kittery, Maine on April 22nd and 23rd, 2023. We will not kick off the event with a live show on April 16th as we had hoped, because we have to do a rebroadcast on that date.
Yeah, it's a holiday. We're not going to be able to do a live show.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
It's Easter. I was looking at that and I was like, there's definitely something important going on that day.
Yes.
Man. Oh boy.
Well, unless Tom Spitaleri wants to do it at a different time, we could do that.
Yeah, I mean it's possible, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
We will. Yes. Actually, we got all our anyway. So we'll be at the Para Expo 2023. No holidays there. Aboard the USS Salem at Quincy, Massachusetts, May 19th, 21st. We'll be among the speakers and will broadcast live from the ship on Sunday, May 21st.
And other events of 2023, which we or my father will be present, include the Exeter UFO Festival in September and the Arizona Dowsers Conference in October. Sorry to step on you there.
Sorry.
You can visit our show website, behindtheparanormal.com, where you can find over 1,100 hours of our regular shows and special broadcasts since 2008 from CBS Radio, Achieve Radio, and here on WOON AM and FM. You can also hear many of these broadcasts on the major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And
we have a show app, very simple, but you can download it by going to behindtheparanormal.com right there on the main page. And so what do we have for next week, Ben?
Well, next week, on January 22nd, we will bring you two close associates of the late UFO pioneer Nigel Kerner from the UK. Danielle Silverman and Dr. John Biggerstaff will be joining us to talk about gray aliens and artificial intelligence. So plan to call in or get your questions to us at paul@behindtheparanormal.com.
And we leave you today with a thought from our favorite 13th century Persian poet and theologian Rumi. What you seek is also seeking you. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno. And thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we shall see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.